My name is Rich Rose. Thanks so much for attending my session. Today's demo is based on a series of exercises I created to get started with serverless on Google Cloud. In this presentation, I will be taking you through a short demo to extend a web application using cloud functions. But first, an introduction. So I am a lab architect at Google Cloud. I'm based out of London. My primary focus is working on training related content, for example, building applications to illustrate handy tips and best practice when moving to the cloud. I am also the author of Hands-on Serverless Computing with Google Cloud, which focuses on teaching you the fundamentals of using fully managed services on Google Cloud. Okay, so let's talk at a high level about fully managed services, serverless, on Google Cloud. From a serverless perspective, there are three main products to mention. Number one, App Engine, which is basically giving you the potential to run web applications at scale. Number two, Cloud Functions, which are event-driven functions. And number three, Cloud Run, which gives you the ability to run containerized web apps. In the talk today, I'm going to focus on Cloud Functions. So over the next 20 minutes, let's see what we can build on Google Cloud. On the diagram on screen, we're looking at a two-tier architecture. That is a front-end local application and a back-end remotely hosted on Google Cloud. The front-end is a standard web application that runs in the browser, and it is based on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The back-end is a cloud function. Communication to it uses standard web protocols. The example has been written in Node.js, but you have the option of using other language runtimes, for example Go, Python, Java, etc., should you prefer. Okay, so what are we going to build? In the spirit of being inclusive, we will be building a small translation utility. The basic premise of the app is to take a word or a sentence and translate that into a specified language. As a parent, I have found this utility to be tremendously helpful when doing language homework sessions with my daughter who is studying Chinese. Due to time constraints, I will focus on the main elements of development and make sure that that is available under version control so you can review it at your leisure. Let's start by looking at the back-end code. In this demo, we're going to download the example code, deploy the cloud function, and get the URL endpoint to use the web app. If you're not familiar with Google Cloud, we're going to use something called Google Cloud Shell. This will perform the development task. Cloud Shell is actually a pre-built development environment that has lots of development tools already loaded. It's basically a development machine in the cloud. Another benefit of using Cloud Shell is that it is already connected to your project. To build a cloud function, we will use Cloud Shell on Google Cloud. For the demonstration today, we'll be using Node.js. Google provides examples in multiple languages, so if JavaScript is not to your taste, feel free to substitute the cloud function code with something in line with your preference. So here we are in the terminal, and we will be using tmux to make our life a bit easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is synchronize the view so I don't have to type the same command in both areas. So now we just move to the correct directory where the code lives. And we can just turn off the synchronization between the panes. That's good. Now what we're going to do is just have a quick look at the code that's available. So as you can see here, we've got a package file, package.json. And we've also got an index.js. Now, the thing I want to call out here is that our application code has some defaults available, which are the message and the language. So the message is set to hello and the default language is set to French. So the next thing we want to do is basically deploy this code. So deploying a cloud function requires the use of a gcloud command. So gcloud is a command line utility that enables you to issue commands to Google Cloud. In this demo, we basically tell gcloud that we want to deploy a function. For this to happen, we need to provide some additional information. For example, the region, the runtime language, the name of the function, and the entry point for the function. A deployment of a cloud function typically takes around 2 minutes. So once the cloud function has been deployed, we will switch over to the Cloud Console UI and be able to see the additional details that are available there. Awesome. So our cloud function has deployed, and you can see there that it's now got a version ID available to it. So let's switch over to the Cloud Console. Okay, now that the code has been deployed, let's just look at the cloud function. So cloud functions are available in the compute menu option. So if you click on cloud functions, that will open up the home page for that. And here we can see that our function has been deployed. So you can see that the information matches the parameters that we entered at the command line. The important thing to note here is that we're going to take a note of the URL specified for our cloud function. To do that, we open up the cloud function deployed and we can see more information relating to that. So there is our URL that we need to cut and paste. So we will do that. If you click on that, that will initiate that function for the first time. So feel free to do that when you run this yourself. Alternatively, we can look through the rest of the options. So one of the things that I want to point out here is that there are actually different things that you can do. So you can see the source code in terms of the index.js and the package.json that we saw initially. You can also see the permissions associated with that, and you can see what's been deployed in terms of IAM, access management. But the thing that's interesting here is that there's an actual test function. So we don't need to add any values into our application because it has defaults, but what we can do is just press the test function and see that the output returns bonjour. So that's exactly what we want to see. So our cloud function has been successfully deployed. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, to recap, what we've done for the back-end code, we've downloaded the template, we've taken that back-end code from version control, we've deployed the cloud function, and we've tested the cloud function, and we've taken that URL endpoint to use in our web application. Now that the back end is up and running, we can turn our attention to the front end. This section can also be done in the Cloud Shell. However, to show some variety, I will do this section from my Chromebook. To build a cloud function, we will use the terminal in Chrome OS. This provides us with a Linux-based interface, so let's use that. Okay, so we're now in my terminal, so hopefully this doesn't throw you off too much. So we're going to go through a similar process to the one we did before. So first clone the repository, but this time we're going to change directory to the front end code. So there we go. And if we just have a quick look at the contents of that, the thing that we're interested in here is not the index.json, but the file that sits within the public directory. So the first thing we're going to do is just install the node modules, which is node npm I, and then we're going to see that the node modules have been installed, so that allows us to run our application. The next thing we need to do is to edit the code. So the code that we need to edit, it lives in the public folder and it's app.js. So that's the one you need. So if you edit that with your favorite editor, you will see right at the top, there is a variable called URL endpoint. So what we're going to do there is paste in the URL from our cloud function that we got earlier. Excellent. Now save that. And then the next thing we need to do is run our node module. So just do npm start and your application will be running. And in our instance, our application is running on port 8080. So that's important because that's the thing that you're going to need to browse to. So we'll do that in the demo. So let's move on to the next section. Great. Let's recap on where we are. So far in our transition to local development, we have downloaded the template, got the front-end code from version control, we've explored the lab source code, and we've edited the web app to point to our cloud function endpoint that we deployed earlier. Okay, the moment of truth. It's demo time. Let's see if our application is doing what it's meant to do. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Okay, so in your browser, we need to enter the URL localhost 8080, and that should bring us to our application. So at this point, you should see the application running. There is a small form that lets you test the message. So we're going to enter hello and then press translate me. It looks like it works. Let's enter another message to make sure. This time enter goodbye. Excellent. That looks like we're in business. Good job. Okay, now we've run the initial test of our application to ensure that it works and connects back to the remote cloud function. what about extending it to use other languages? Well, the app uses a JSON config file for other languages. So we can show how to extend beyond a single language without needing to change the backend, i.e. the cloud function. For our demo today, we have 3 language files available in a JSON format. These files live in the public/data directory. So what we need to do is basically amend our application to use these updated files. So first, let's have a look at what the file entails. So each file entails the language, a flag, and a translation flag. So as you go through each of the language.json files, you will note they all correspond to the same format. So French, Spanish, and the final one of language 3 has a number of languages. In fact, the top 10 languages in the world. So let's update our application to use that updated language file and see what effect that has on the application. So in your favorite editor again, edit the public app.json file, and at the top of the file you'll see a variable named file name. What we're going to do here is add another file name into the bargain. So if you're going to use language 2, you would change the value to language 2. If you want to use language 3, add a variable for language 3. Don't forget to comment out the file name that you're not using. That's very important. And then save that file. Now what we can do again now is just rerun our file, or sorry, we can rerun our application. So again, use npm start. And again, we're listening on port 8080. So as before, now rerun the application. Again, browse to localhost :8080. And then we can retry the same tests as we did previously. So let's enter some text. And press translate. Excellent. So now we have a number of languages representing our translation, and for each element that initiates a cloud function. So each of the 9 boxes will go to the remote cloud function and request a response with the relevant translation. So let's just check that that actually works. And we can see that it goes off, it processes the information and comes back with a translation, in this instance, goodbye. So let's give it something a bit more difficult to translate. How about Google Cloud? Okay, that doesn't seem to be too difficult. Let's try something a bit more difficult. I wonder what serverless translates to. That's probably a good thing to know. Excellent. That seems to work a treat. Right. Let's get back to the demo. Amazing work. In the demo, you have learnt a lot of things. Let's recap. Firstly, you've learnt how to use Google Cloud Shell. You've then learned how to retrieve code from version control. You've then learned how to deploy a public cloud function, view the details of a deployed cloud function, invoke a deployed cloud function to test, run a Node.js application locally on Chrome OS, and add a remote endpoint to an application to invoke a cloud function. To get access to the code used today, use the QR link on the slide. My name is Rich Rose. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of the sessions today. All the best.